Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Broward County Main Library. My name is Tanya Simons-Oper. I'm the Director for Outreach Services for the Libraries Division, and I'd like to welcome you today to our Environmental Justice, Conservation, and We the People Conference. I'm very happy to be the host facility for this program, and I'd like to first of all, thank Al Calloway for nudging me and saying, Tanya, we need a place, what can we do? And I said, no problem. And then we found out that we did have a little problem. And on that point, I'd like to thank Steve Roderberg, the technician who was off today, who said he would come to facilitate this activity and this program. So thank you, Steve. He's up in the booth. Well, all of this is made possible by a mobilizing conference group, and that included Greenleaf Incorporated, South Florida Community Partners, the South Florida Atlantic University Department of Urban and Regional Planning, of course Broward County Libraries, the Wilderness Society, the South Florida Times, and certainly two very important people who are still brothers and sisters to Broward County, Frank and Audrey Peterman. Housekeeping issues. The bathrooms are to your right, to your left as you go out on the wall. There's where the old phone bank used to be. There are also bathrooms upstairs on the other floor should you plan to visit during the course of your stay here in the library. During the lunch break, restaurants are just a few in the area. I don't know if you have planned lunch for this facility, but we do have Subway and one other restaurant on the outside of the building. And then there's a Riverwalk. So the Riverwalk is a place for a lot of very reasonable eating. I have the great pleasure of introducing the Madame, Mrs. Peterman, who I knew many years ago, and she did some wonderful things, she and her husband here, to bring us closer to the issues of environment, and that's what we're here to speak about today. And I'd just like to say, looking at that particular program that we just saw, we really need to do more in the libraries division, in public education. That's what I do. I develop programs for public education, whether it be for adults, senior citizens, or children. And it's so critical that we really take a look at these issues and understand the relevance of those issues as it impacts the global environment, our local environments, and mostly our health. Well, on with the good stuff. When Audrey Peterman gleefully took her husband up on his suggestion that they take a couple of months off and drive around the country to see America, she had no idea that it would lead to her life's mission. What was originally planned as a 2-month trip turned into a wonderful lifetime journey. Upon beholding the glories of the land in such spectacular places as the Grand Canyon, and seeing less than a handful of America's multi-ethnic and multiracial citizens in the national parks, Audrey became a leader in the movement to bring people of color as rightful stakeholders into the great American outdoors and to the diversity of the green movement. Since 1995, she has worked to expose the vast acreage of America's natural treasury to urban populations and to include the stakeholder interests and perspectives of African Americans and other Americans of color into the environmental and conservation movements. Audrey is president and co-founder of Earthwise Productions Incorporated, a consulting and publication firm which publishes Pick Up and Go. And I remember when you started that down here, she made these phenomenal trips to Grand Canyon and these national parks, and I said, oh, Audrey, I want to go. And I always had a conflict, but even though you've been away 7 years, I do plan to join you on one of those ventures. Through broadcast, cable, and digital media, speaking engagements, voluntary board governance service, and wide-ranging community involvement, she promotes the exploration of our national parks and other publicly owned lands as the way to learn more about ourselves individually and our shared history as a nation. Audrey serves on the boards of 5 national and regional conservation organizations, the National Parks Conservation Association, the Association of Partners for Public Lands, the Upper Chattahoochee River Keeper, Greeley Youth Foundation, and the Arthur R. Marshall Foundation Advisory Board, as well as on the steering committee of the award-winning Keeping It Wild program in Atlanta. Let's give a warm Broward County welcome to Mrs. Audrey Peterman.
Thank you, Tanya. Good morning, everyone. She told my whole life story, so, I could just go sit down. But I'd like to say that I'm so happy to be here this morning. Frank and I are thrilled. We really feel like it is a homecoming. And as we drove down from Atlanta last night and got here somewhere around 10:30, it's just really good to be in this environment where I can get my energy restored from the energy that you bring to the table. I'd also like to recognize Al Calloway for his stalwart organizing, and Professor Yak Voss and FAU, and all the people who have done so much to create this opportunity for us to learn together and expand and move forward. We know that, yes. We know that no one or two people really help really move things forward exponentially. Movement happens when all of us are engaged together, as our president has shown in his grassroots organizing campaign. So I just want to mention that in 1995, when Frank and I first got word about the project to restore the Florida Everglades, we had actually just come back from spending 2 months driving around the country and seeing some of the most glorious unspoiled landscapes in the world. And so having an appreciation of what it meant to have a national park system, and learning that the Everglades National Park was part of the primary reason we had to restore the Everglades, and also as a means of ensuring our water supply, we were very, very, very excited to be part of the effort. And the thing that I can tell you after looking at that documentary, The Story of Stuff, is that our experience in being in the outdoors is that there is a spiritual quality that fills you up. You see the beauty of the natural world. I often say that I feel as though I see the face of God. And seeing so much beauty in its natural state, there's kind of an elemental connection that happens that says, well, I must be beautiful too. Because whoever created this is also created me. And as perfect as that is, I must have the potential to be more like that. So, as I mentioned, when we first heard about the Everglades Restoration Project, we were really, really excited. And then, as we had noted in going around the country, we didn't see very many African Americans or Latinos or other people of color involved with the environment. And very often we heard the expression that, people of color are not really interested in the environment and the outdoors. And we were like, well, how could that be true? Because we're people of color and we're very interested. So it's really fascinating now to come back to Fort Lauderdale almost 14 years later and find that the political landscape has changed so dramatically that we now have a president who is from, quote unquote, a minority segment of the population. We have a secretary of the Department of the Interior, which governs almost 600 million acres of the public land system, including the national park system, and he's of Latino extraction, Hispanic extraction. And now we have the director of the Environmental Protection Agency, who is also a person of color. The point I'm making is the landscape has changed dramatically. And we recognize now that we need the full spectrum of America's people in all its rich diversity to be engaged with our public land system and with the protection of our environment. And so, I am thrilled to be here this morning. Frank is thrilled to be here. And we just want to say, as more of us embrace the issue of our responsibility, our connectedness, and the grace that enables us to be part of the public land system and nature, we will also embrace the opportunity to restore our priceless Everglades to its rightful place as a world, national, and natural treasure. Well, Tanya asked me if I could introduce Frank and if I needed his bio that I had sent to her. And I mentioned that since I've been living with this guy for 17 years now, maybe I could say a thing or two about him. What should I say, first of all? We've met a lot of people in the 14 years that we've been doing this, and Frank is still my hero. Perhaps even more so now than when we got started so long ago. because I have found him in every respect to be diligent, to go the extra mile, to make his voice heard, even when the position that he's bringing forward is not popular in the room. And very often, he's the only person in the room bringing the issue of the least among us to the table. Just to give you an example, I can't even remember where we were last week, but last weekend he got back from a conference in Durham, North Carolina at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, and then Sunday we had to go to something else, and then it was a whole week of activity this week, and then, you know, Al made the call a couple weeks ago about this conference, and so here we are. So the point I want to make is, he's relentless, he's diligent, he's dedicated, he's a force for good in the environmental community, and most of all, I consider him a wonderful human being. And I think you'll share that feeling with me as you hear from my wonderful husband, Frank Peterman, the regional director, the Southeastern Regional Director of the Wilderness Society in Atlanta.
That long walk was designed so after she introduced me, you could have a chance to leave if you care. Let me congratulate my longtime friend and colleague and tireless warrior, Al Calloway. He is an amazing human being. Al and I come from, as well as many of you out there, the battles of the 60s. This is just one more struggle for us, but it's a joyful struggle because it is about people. Let me also thank Tanya, the library system, for having this affair here, and let me, when we got here this morning, the first person we saw was Gene and his wife Wallace. And I said, that augurs well for the conference because the warriors are here. we know absolutely that we shall have the day in this matter. When I saw what the conference was about, it did send me back years. And one of the first things I thought about was an incident that happened. I can now talk about things that happened decades. I don't have to talk about weeks and months. I can talk about things that happened decades ago. I was up in Gainesville, Georgia, on a mortgage matter. And as I began to talk to the judge about the mortgage matter, something about his name was gnawing in the back of my head, almost telling me, go slow. But I couldn't figure out why was I a little concerned about his name. But after I held forth and told him what all the statute meant and what the legislatures intended when they passed the statute, and he stopped and he heard me out. He said, now, Mr. Peterman, let me see, what did I mean when I wrote that? Turned out that he was Judge Atkins, who had written one of the classic books on real estate in the state of Florida. I share that with you because when we began to talk about the impact of the law that is part of the Word Act of 2000, when we talk about that and the inclusion of the requirement for equal participation in the Everglades Restoration Project, that language is in there, and it is in there verbatim the way I wrote it. So when the Army Corps of Engineers, and let me take that back, the way we wrote it, when the Army Corps of Engineers, the Florida Water Management District, all of these other people began to want to interpret that statute, give me a call and I can tell you what I mean. They're not the experts.